All right, is recording. So, boy, let's definitely get started. um, this,
Wherever you want to start.
yeah, this will be raw. So, actually, first of all, thank you everyone who's going to be watching this. This is just kind of like my own version of a debate, just besides StreamYard. It's more of a discussion, I guess. That's kind of what I'm aiming for. But
Right, right.
um, But again, thank you everyone for joining. I'm Samuel David Spoonhour. I will be the host of this. Uh, do you want me to give your full name?
My name's Elliot. I'm an ex-Christian, now atheist, and I'm just here to have a conversation.
Okay. Well, and again, thank you for coming on. This will be no cut. There will be this will be absolutely as raw as possible. And guys, I might have to cut out just because I might have to do something. So hopefully that won't happen, but we'll see. And I think I do have to mute my desktop audio because that would cause a lovely echo. Actually, you know what? No, I shouldn't do that because then people can't hear you. And I don't. Yeah. Okay. I was confusing myself there. Um, but the topic is objective versus subjective morality. I kind of wanted to title this, Does Anything Really Matter? So, do with that as you will. I want to try and stay focused on that. I know it's so hard when you get into conversations, you get off to stuff. So, and even I've been listening to a lot of debates lately, and like even these people with like 5 PhDs get off topic all the time. So even not
Yeah,
actually 5 PhDs, I'm just exaggerating, but um,
and
it
I'm fine getting off topic. Conversations go where they do. You can't
yeah.
control it.
Yeah, no, it is fine if it does happen, and it probably will. So, but I wanted you to just share. I think it's best if we like do introductory, and then like kind of go into like point and then point and really try to listen to each other. So, I want to give first. You give your kind of introduction. I know you said that you had some new kind of moral argument you had. And you just tell me like specifically what is your position on morality.
Okay. So I wouldn't say it's a new moral argument, but it's one I hear very, very seldom, if I hear it ever. I know the standard atheist argument for morality is that we have evolved a morality throughout human history to reflect a few different factors, such as negotiation, reciprocity, theory of mind, empathy, and we base it around the well being of ourselves and others and what is best for the group. And while I do agree and accept that form of morality, mine is more targeted toward the Christian. And I assume that you would agree that your morality comes from the Bible. Am I correct on that?
I would say more specifically it comes from God's character. So
Okay.
so I would say,
But
yeah.
you learn his character from the Bible or
Well, I think
from
that
somewhere else?
I think in a sense you have natural revelation and special revelation. So you have pieces of it
Hmm.
in natural revelation, like just even the idea that people understand that murder of another human being is wrong, right? Even though they may not know why. Of course, I would say that's because God's ingrained a conscience in us. Um, but I would say, naturally you can understand some things, but more specifics, you would need probably like a special revelation. I believe, yes, that is from the Bible. So,
Okay. Do you follow in your life day to day? Do you follow an internal standard of morality or an external standard of morality?
so you mean like based on what I think is right or what like something else is telling me is right? Is that what you're getting at?
Kind of. I mean, there's only two sources. Either it comes from your head, from in an internal moral compass, or it
Right.
comes from an external standard.
So
Are you using both?
yeah, I would say in a sense, just because, I would say in the just with what I said earlier, we have an intuitive idea of what is right and what is wrong. But not exactly all the specifics. So I can use like logic and understanding, and if I'm confused in one point, then I can seek special revelation and see like, oh, this essentially is pointing that, okay, this idea is wrong, and here's why, and this is why this idea is better, and you should do it this way, right? So I would say kind of both, but in the sense that I'm actually using my head, I'm actually using logic to understand like what is the right thing to do and why. So
Okay. So my argument or my contention is that we have to make some axiomatic statements about our perception of reality. We have to start with something. And what I start with is I think, therefore I am.
yeah,
There is nothing else I can say objectively about reality except that statement. I don't know if I'm in a dream or not in a dream. I don't know if I'm in a matrix. I don't. I can't fully say anything for sure about the external reality. But what I do know is that I think, therefore I am. So I start from that perspective. That's the only thing I know for sure. And then going past that, I can add axiomatic logic statements onto it, like the three laws of logic: the law of
right.
non-contradiction, law of excluded middle, and law of identity.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't prove those in and of themselves, but we assume them to be true because they function correctly in the world. They work,
Right.
so we accept those. Um, so my contention about morality is that you're trapped inside of your brain. You think, therefore you are. And because of that, every single thing that is external to your brain has to enter your brain through your five senses, and you have to evaluate it through your brain, and you have to judge it. Therefore, if you have an external moral standard, such as the Bible or God's word, you can't use that standard until you have judged it. You have judged it to be a correct standard. Therefore, you are using your brain to do so before you can use any kind of standard that is external to your brain. So, therefore, you are your own God, and you are um, a victim of subjective morality. You are a moral relativist. There is no way around this. Um, you're going to judge or evaluate everything before you use it. So my contention is that the Bible is not your standard of morality. Your brain is your standard of morality. So if you have admitted that, and you say, well, that's my God-given moral compass, then I would further contend that using your internal moral compass, you can then judge God to be immoral. I know I kind of skipped to the end there a
No,
little
no,
too
I get.
quick.
I could see where the logic comes in. I see what you mean by that. Uh, was that all that you had to say? Was that the end of your introduction, or?
Yeah, we can take it from there.
Okay.
So you can go ahead.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate you giving me your thoughts. I think you mentioned that a bit with after the one video you had sent me, and I had given you my thoughts, and then you kind of had given me a piece of that argument, and um, I think I disagree. I
Of
have
course,
heard.
we wouldn't be here if you
Right,
didn't.
right. I have heard this before. My mic's a bit too loud. I have heard this argument before in a sense. I think you kind of pieced it together a bit better. I really enjoyed geometry when I was going through it, and I was very sad that I only got a B plus. I really was dying for an A plus, but it was my own fault. I went too fast through my tests. Um, but I really loved, and I always wondered why they didn't teach this at the beginning of math, because it is the foundation of math, right? You start with the three basic proofs. Now one proof, a one line that goes on forever, or one line that goes in one direction continues on forever. That one's kind of been debated as like, oh well, there's no such thing as an infinity in math, so technically it could actually reach itself at one point and touch itself, right? But that is one thing kind of assumed in there, and But regardless of that, that's beside the point. You assume the three basic proofs, and you go from if this, then this, if this, then this, if this, then this. You literally build this tree and structure. It's literally the philosophy of math. You start with these basic ideas, and you continue off of that. It's the whole worldview of math, and just how you build off of that reason. It's all deductive reasoning. It's the essential proper way to do even any and all science, is that you start out with basic ways of understanding. You even mentioned like the three laws of logic, right? But the way that I essentially see the world around me is that morality in and of itself is, those actually are laws of morality that are grounded just as the laws of logic. I may not be able to explain to you exactly in full detail that they do in fact exist. Like I can't prove to you, right? I can't prove to you that the laws of logic exist, but I can give evidence for and some logical reasoning for. Now, if something is objective, it's grounded in something. We could say that the laws of logic are grounded in the universe around us. That kind of assumes that the universe is the ultimatum, right? This in the idea of philosophy, you always have some beginning and end point, right? You have an ultimatum where things can come from, right? This is where like Aristotle and Plato kind of coined. I think it was also Sophocles, the uncaused cause. Even though they believed in multiple gods and an eternal universe, they said there's still something out there where everything, all logic, all ideas flow from, that is always objective, a perfect grounding where everything is unchanging, eternal. And so I would say that morality is one of those things that is derived from this objective standard, and that would be God, and it's grounded in who he is, which is by definition unchanging, an eternal, infinite being. Therefore, then objectivity can be grounded in that and can actually be solid. Now, what you need to do is more or less figure out, is morality a constant thing? Is that actually objective? Say different from our thoughts of what is moral, right? The specifics of it, but and this is where some of the you can really get into debates. This is really where the debates derive, is like are our thoughts of morality what makes it ultimately subjective, or is it that we all seek what is good? In fact, no one wants to be on the wrong side, right? Everyone understands the idea of right and wrong, but what they think is in the category of right and what they think is in the category of wrong may be different or altered. But like you could go into a different country, say in Europe, and they understand that like, okay, raping children is wrong. But you also may go to an island and where they think eating people is wrong, or eating people is right. But in their sense, them eating each other is perfectly fine, or not eating each other. I got that totally backwards, but I think you know what I mean. So I've heard great cases for objective morality. It's kind of something that really takes a lot of time. I don't have the time to go over all of it and just the different pieces of it, but I would say I hold to the view of objective morality because I see evidence for an infinite being, and I see these laws and these rules that need some objective grounding, something that is greater than myself. I can't prove that any of that exists, except that you're right. I think that, therefore I am. In fact, I said this one time to you that I can't know anything for absolute certainty. Now, that is a claim of absolute certainty. It's self-defeating, right? So, but I can know some things for absolute certainty, such as I think, therefore I am. I know I exist because I can reason, right? So that gives that gives me proof of that. I can't necessarily do that with other things, like even like the resurrection of Jesus. You can't just use historical evidence to prove it. It's just whether or not it's good enough to give the inference that, okay, this actually happened, right? I can't prove to you that my camera isn't some magical boy, I want to say it actually is a black magic camera. So, but it could be like alien space tech, right? I can't necessarily prove that or disprove that, but I could give you evidence that it is not, right? I could give you evidence that it is something else. So, I think in the end, that's my view, is that objective morality, you can't necessarily prove it, but you can't necessarily prove subjective morality. But if I were to say that, oh, well, I'm the final arbitrator, I think you said that to me last time, we're all the final arbitrators of ourselves. The problem is
Right.
to impose that view on someone else is being an arbitrator of someone else, which essentially is a double standard. So you have to be really careful when giving off that idea. I get what you're saying, but it seems a bit like double standard. And you can,
Well, it's only for the individual.
well, I mean, if
I
you
didn't say
say,
that it was imposing it on
well, if
somebody
you say
else.
to me that I think that we like an individual is the is like God or like the final arbitrator, you're essentially saying that claim itself is excluded from that idea, but in that claim is essentially imposed on you and arbitrary to you, but you are also still a final arbitrator. So if I say, well, that claim is false, I arbitrarily say that claim is false, then it's kind of a double standard in a sense. I don't know if you're following my logic.
Yeah, I'm really not, because we see reality from a first person perspective. So I am the final arbiter of reality for myself. Like, clearly not for you. So I'm not inside your head,
Yeah,
but I live in a first person perspective. So I have to be the final arbiter for what I see through my own five senses.
yeah.
I'm not necessarily imposing that
I'm saying
on
the
you.
claim.
It's that every man has to decide for themselves.
Yeah, I'm just saying like I get how you could reason that correctly in a sense, but I think it's less of like this person has the power of God as more of has a piece of the characteristics of a God in the sense that you have free choice, right? You have a free will. It's not just a deterministic world. I don't know if you hold to the deterministic philosophy.
I don't believe in free will.
Okay,
No.
but then
That's a completely separate debate from morality.
right,
So we
right,
should
right.
probably avoid the free will debate.
Yeah, no, it's interesting to consider these things. I just more or less of my point is that if I am the final arbitrator for myself, then why is it that claim or that idea in and of itself is imposed on me? That claim of, oh well, you get to choose. Are the final one who chooses something, but then that own claim is put upon me. That in and of itself is arbitrary and without a definitive reason, because it's kind of breaking its own rule and saying like, oh, you're the final one who chooses, but yet it's choosing for you, right? Um, so that was my only point, is that idea defeats itself because it has to break its own rule to be true. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm not getting
No,
that part. So I would simply retort and say, do you send yourself to hell in your worldview?
uh, that's like saying or that's almost like a question like, do you send yourself to jail? It's like, well, I mean, if the judge is doing his job and if I don't do my job, then it's kind of both our faults. So
Well, it's a common Christian apologetic that you send yourself to hell. God doesn't do it to you because of free will. So if you are a advocate of free will, you've in some way sent yourself to hell. Therefore, you are the final arbiter of what you believe or
sure,
accept as that. I think therefore I am.
yeah,
The buck stops with your brain. That was my only point. Um, Therefore, all morality has to be subjective and is subjective to yourself. So if you accept the Bible as a objective standard of morality. You've had to judge it to be an objective standard of morality before you can take it up as a standard to measure anything by. Therefore, you are putting yourself above the Bible, judging the Bible to be a correct ruler, and therefore the buck stops with you, not the Bible. So I think it's a self-defeating proposition if any Christian ever says they use the Bible as their objective source of morality. It's really themselves. Like I believe all morality comes at the end of the day, it comes from right here, individually between our ears. And there's no way to escape that problem because we're trapped inside of our brains. We judge everything to be true or false or right or wrong from right inside of our brains. So any objective moral standard that we're appealing to is going to come secondary to our first person perspective of it.
So
I really don't know how you escape that. So the only escape hatch that you do have is to say, well, God gave me that objective moral compass when he created me. It comes from inside. And that would be a Romans 1 advocacy that everybody knows that God exists. Everybody knows right from wrong. And from that, I would enter the Christian worldview and say, okay, let's say God gave me an objective standard of right and wrong. I am using that objective standard that's internal to judge God himself and go inside the story and say, well, using my moral intuitions, I cannot see how God is good. I see God as evil using my internal moral
right.
intuitions. So we have a conflict right there. You have judged God to be good. I've judged God to be evil. We've used the same standard, our internal moral standard. Where do we go from there? And where do we go from there is the devil's in the details. We would have to discuss the specifics of Scripture and the God portrayed in the Bible, and somehow either defend that God as being moral or oppose that God as being immoral using our own subjective internal moral standards, which you claim God has given us. And I'm fully prepared to do that from Scripture.
So, do you think that morality is just based upon what something does or what someone does, or is it actually something that is right or wrong, existential of human beings?
I think right and wrong are concepts that are labels, in fact, that we have made up to label things right or wrong. I don't think that right or wrong necessarily exists in the way that the Christian worldview wants to
So, is
portray it.
anything?
You could
Sorry.
you could relabel it good and evil. Well, good and evil are labels we put on things that we have collectively decided are good or evil, based on their results in the real world. So, yeah,
So, like, we might assume the purpose of life, say in some atheists assume that the purpose of life is like human flourishing, and even some will say also animal flourishing, and even some weird ones will say plant flourishing along with that. But morality, in a sense, what is right and what is wrong is, do you know the goal of the game in the first place? Do you know why we are here? If you can answer that question, why we are here, then you can know then specifics according to that, logically, what is right and what is wrong. So, like, what is our ultimate purpose in life to existence? Like, is it that humans should flourish? Is it that animals should flourish? Is it that plants should flourish?
honestly, I don't know. And if the well, if the Christian worldview is correct, then what is it? What is supposed to
Well,
flourish if the Christian
it's
worldview is
ultimately
correct?
God being glorified and human beings seeking to do so, either with um, bringing people to the real, or helping people to realize that God should be glorified, because by definition, an infinitely good being or I wouldn't say requires in that sense, but deserves infinite respect. So in that same sense, then our purpose would be according to our creator, the one who put us here in the first place. So it's contingent then on the one who put us here for a reason. So that reason, then we can derive morality from that. So like, okay, it's good to say praise God. It is bad to not praise God, right? So specific things like that. But like, and I understand in a materialistic perspective, you can't really say that anything is ultimately right or wrong. You essentially have to say that, well, I don't really know if there is an ultimate objective meaning to life, and so therefore, all it's left up to is subjective meaning, right, versus objectivity, where I would say, oh, there are things that are actually right or wrong, existential of us, outside of us, right?
Okay, you mentioned her human flourishing earlier. So I would ask you, does the Christian worldview have human flourishing as its goal?
In a sense, yes, because if humans flourish, in the sense uh, of ultimately seeking to glorify God, then yes, even like how God created animals for humankind, for humankind to rule over them, and to even use them as food, and to even like have them as pets, right? Um, that's more of because and use them even to like say till ground or get milk, right? Or also for sacrifices that the Jews do, right? And used to feed them. And so in a sense there is human flourishing, but it's all to glorify God in the end.
What is, before I move on to my conclusion here or my next point, what does glorify God even mean? Even as a former Christian, I don't quite grasp that concept.
To express his traits and characteristics, and to uh, give him honor where honor is due, because goodness is known by who he is, then essentially, oh shoot, I just lost that train of thought.
But like, how do we do that? How do we honor and glorify God? That's where this
That's
breaks
where I
down
think
for me.
special revelation is important. I would say, like,
Is it an action?
yes, I would say like telling other people about him, telling other people about his goodness, um, essentially uh, being kind to those around you because they are also made in the image of God. So treating others as the way you would want to be treated. So like Jesus said, the greatest commandments are love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, the Shema, and then also to love your neighbor as yourself, because your neighbor is created in the image of God as well as you are. So you're all just pieces of God's beautiful creation, and you all have a piece of God's own sense of that he can choose whatever he wants to do. We also can choose what we want to do. So in that sense, we're also made in God's image. So we are to respect and also help those who are also made in his image. So I say, yeah, it does require action, but also heart. But heart brings about action, right? True love means you're going to do something, right? If you say, I love my wife, it means you're going to spend time with her, you're going to talk to her, you're going to buy her things, right?
Okay, so you use a lot of positive adjectives like kindness and doing good to others, and I assume you use the Bible as your rubric for this. You're to follow its example as how to carry out these things, these actions.
In a sense,
And you've also said that the goal is the goal of the Christian worldview is the human flourishing of others,
kind of.
and kind of, but enough that we could say that. So let me get to my point here. So if I take the Bible and I use that as my example of how to treat others and how to live and all those positive adjectives that you used, I see absolutely none of that anywhere in the Bible. What I see is God setting an example of how to do the worst possible things to the human race that you could ever imagine, from the beginning all the way to the end. This is my problem with your worldview of morality and the objective moral standard that you claim comes from the Bible. So we could start off with the Garden of Eden. God puts two people, His creation, in that garden, and they don't have the knowledge of good and evil, but they're put there with the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and He puts it there knowing with full foreknowledge that they are going to disobey and eat from it, even though they don't even know what sin is. And they go ahead and they eat from it, and then God judges them terribly instead of forgiving them and starting over. And then we move forward after He curses the ground and basically changes the entire landscape of the world into some kind of difficult place to live, throws them out of the garden. And then a few thousand or 100 years later, depending on how you put it, He decides that all humankind is corrupt. And He repents that He created man. And so He floods the world and kills who knows how many people, tons of them, obviously. And then He starts over, and we go through this garbage all over again, until eventually He picks a special people, the Jews and the Hebrews in Egypt, and He goes through a very theatrical way of dealing with the Egyptians by hardening their hearts, taking away their free will, Pharaoh specifically, and then He eventually kills all the firstborn, and that's another slaughter, and then leads them into the Red Sea and kills Pharaoh and his entire army. And then this continues on, these constant judgments. Oh, I forgot the Tower of Babel, confusing the languages, spreading people out. Not allowing them to work together, causing the root of all wars from then on, the difference of language and culture. Basically, this is God's grudge against humans. This is not human
I hate to
flourishing
interrupt,
in any possible
but
way. Yeah, go ahead.
Zoom being free only gives us 40 minutes. So we
Okay,
have
where are
we
we
have
at?
like 6 minutes left.
Well,
I'm
crap.
so sorry. But
I haven't even gotten to my,
yeah, your final
my
conclusion.
with any of this.
I'm so sorry. I hate to say that. You might be able to actually just come back. We might be able to just restart and do meeting
Okay.
again. But I
Do you want to do that right now? Because we're getting good here.
Yeah, we have
This is
just 5
important.
minutes. I did have a rebuttal for that. Yeah, it does say meeting 40 minutes. So, but yeah, we could just quit and hopefully then come back. I think, unless I don't want to just quit and be like, let's see, and it's just like you can only do it once a week because I think that's how it works actually.
We could always switch over to Google Meet
Okay.
or FaceTime if you want to keep recording and you have the ability to do that on your end with those other two apps. I don't know if you do
Yeah,
or not.
I can do that actually on probably Facebook.
Then you can like just splice it together.
Yeah. But here, you continue and try to finish. You got 4 minutes left.
Okay. Okay. I see the Bible as God's grudge against man from beginning to end. And the only bright spot in that is the so-called redemption story of Christ dying and being the sacrifice. And even that is a flawed perspective because God's killing His own Son, and then He is throwing anyone in hell who doesn't believe in this wild story that that's the purpose of it. And then you have Revelation capping off the entire thing where Jesus comes back and destroys the entire world and throws everybody into the lake of fire who didn't believe this wild tale. I don't see any part of the Bible's narrative where it's human well-being as the goal. It's human suffering, if anything, as the goal. And I think that anybody who is not of the Christian faith, who isn't indoctrinated from their youth, can see this very clearly. And it took me a very long time to see for myself. Indoctrination is a very powerful thing.
Yeah, it is.
I just now I look at this and I'm like, this is absolutely disgusting and vile and clearly not true. Because for such a thing to be true, well, it's ridiculous. It's medieval. It's not medieval. It's antiquity. It's how the Greeks and the Romans viewed these vengeful gods, and we've moved so far past that I have trouble understanding how somebody in the 21st century can look at this from any perspective and say, "Oh, this is actually truth." Um, you've lost me. I mean, it's so obviously not true. Um, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. I don't understand it,
Okay. And
except from an indoctrination perspective. Like then I get it. Like if you're trained to believe this throughout your entire youth, you're going to stick with it. You're going to find reasons to you're going to look for reasons and find reasons to keep believing it, even in the face of it being axiomatically false.
it's funny you mentioned indoctrination, because that's something I'm very against. I've seen a lot of kids my age just in the like fundamentalist community, because you grew up Baptist, right? Um,
Yep.
and like I don't want to say my parents are fundamentalists. I think they were more conservative at one point. They're definitely less more so, and more like evangelical now, and just a lot more grace. And I will say my parents are amazing, but even some ideas I adopted, like King James onlyist, I I got that from me. My dad did not hold that view. My mom doesn't even hold that view. And like hyper conservative on music. I don't know how I got that view, because it's a terrible view, especially King James only. The arguments for King James only are terrible. But that's really not my point. In the end, you really should think. I know we both agree youth should be informed and make informed decisions. And from what I have seen, okay, and I realize you might disagree with me here, but from what I have seen, indoctrination causes more kids to run away than to hold to, especially Generation Z. They Once they feel like it's shoved down
Yeah,
their
I
throats,
would
they
disagree.
tend to run away from these ideas because it feels like it's being pushed upon them, and they always complain about that. Whereas people who actually follow the logic with and actually have a tighter grip, and in a sense they build it from their own ideals, and people who say like come out of atheism or come out of skepticism, they tend to be the most fervent, zealous, like the ones who really hold to it the most are the ones who used to be like very atheistic. So lost them. Oh no. Let's try Facebook. Let's see. Call. Do 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 do. See if it works. Oh. Sound, microphone, video. Can you hear me? No answer. Redial. Allow. Share video. Okay. Can you hear me now? Can you see me?
Yeah, you're good. I can't see you,
Okay.
but I can hear you, so that's good enough for me.
I do want to get my camera on. Sorry, we like got cut off the moment I like said something.
Yeah, you were talking about indoctrination and how it results in deconversions.
Yeah, from what I have seen and observed in like the interviews that I've done, and people in my generation that I've talked to, also even like millennials, I see that a lot with millennials, and they don't usually like talking to me
So
then.
you're right. I would disagree with that because indoctrination simply means that you were raised to believe something. Now, most people that are in a religion were raised to believe it. It's very, very rare that somebody comes to a religion who wasn't raised in it. If you were to look at the percentages, it's a fraction. So the people that are raised in it almost always stay in it, or at least the ones that stay in it were always raised in it. So I would disagree with that. When you raise a child to believe a certain thing, they stick with it most of the time.
Yeah, and okay, I don't know if I'm gonna get this working. I have my face now on the recording, so at least I have that because I wanted something like that. So, but I'm glad that we can
Okay.
hear each other now. So, and that's fine.
I can only see myself.
Okay, that's fine. You disagree with me. I realize this is why we
Well,
have
I
these
mean, I
discussions.
don't necessarily want to disagree on this one. I do want us to come to some sort of
Well, it's
agreement
it's
because
because
just
of
as a
the interviews that I've done and like people I have talked to want like face to face, and like
no, I understand that,
so.
but that is an anecdotal sampling because if you, just on average, if you were to go to a church, let's just take a Baptist church because we both have a background in
Hmm.
that, and you were to just pick somebody out of the pews and say, were you raised into being a Christian? And almost all of them, like the vast majority, were raised into the faith.
Yeah.
Some of them might have changed denominations, but it's so rare for you to find someone who was non-religious and came to the religion after they had come of age.
Yeah, I think
I mean, that seems like a very easy thing to agree
I
on.
would say that it is certainly more rare to see more people who say came from something else, like say to Christianity. I'm just saying that I think indoctrination actually hurts uh, religious ideals, specifically like Christianity. I would just say more in America and even like England, just kind of the more like, I don't want to say other countries don't have intellectuals, but I would say a lot of like intellectuals, um, loud atheists. I would say, Richard Dawkins is like very prevalent. And I know like,
Who was not indoctrinated? He's not a former Christian, by the way.
oh, well, he's still against the grain in a sense because the majority of the people who live in England are
Well,
Christian, but
we're all anyone who's an atheist is against the grain. The
yeah.
majority of the public believes in
Oh
God.
yeah, I agree
I
with
think
that. You go to India, it's totally different, right?
it's important to admit that the like almost everyone is statistically insignificant. The number of people who have come to religion without being indoctrinated or raised into it.
Yeah, uh I think in the end you have to really step back and look at, and I know you can agree with this. I realize that you think that will lead to atheism, where you like, you step back, examine your worldview, and all everything that's in it. Actually see, are these things historically true, scientifically true, philosophically true, like actually seeking truth, um, and I think that that is just really important, but that's because we think that truth is important. Now, I think that truth isn't subjective. It's not relative. It's bound in something existential to us because even though we even though we did not exist at the beginning of the universe, those laws of say even like truth or laws of logic, laws of nature still existed regardless of us existing. So this is why so many people have posed, okay, well uh maybe in that sense then the universe is what the ultimatum, and that's why like the eternal universe was so held to for so long. Even like, people came up with string theory, or not string theory, I'm sorry. um I actually forgot what it's called. It was
Quantum theory.
no, it was something. It was what Fred Hoyle really tried to hold to and prove, which in his research he ended up becoming a theist. He was a very famous astrophysicist, staunch atheist, and he just said that the evidence convinced him of theism. And so, just
Well, it's a sample size of one.
oh, well, I mean, there are certainly many. I would say they are probably a bit quieter, but than certain atheists. But that's
But are
also
these
more
people
subjective.
these people that are often referenced by theists or Christians, such as Anthony Flew and the guy you just talked to, are they coming to the gospel or are they coming to this abstract idea of theism? Because I think that matters for your own
Yeah,
position.
I mean, it. This is why I think there's a difference between arguments for the existence of a creator, like some type of theistic or deistic God, versus like Christianity is in fact the true worldview, and that would be more found in the resurrection of Jesus. So whether you like it or not, and this was another point I was going to say, is that, I appreciate your thoughts, but ultimately, if you don't even know what the objective of life is, and essentially you're just saying that morality is all just subjective, then I completely disagree with you. Does that mean it's true? No.
I didn't give you the objective of life.
Well, you
I
said you didn't
switched to
know.
asking you. Well, no, well, not necessarily. I do know what the objective of life is, but I bypassed that and I asked you what your position was.
Okay. Well, either way, my point is that if everything's still relative and subjective, why doesn't my disagreement mean that you're wrong, in a sense that's where the idea of, oh, well, it's only all subjective, but you're saying that it's wrong because, oh, well, I don't like the fact that God sends people to hell. I don't like the fact, because that's all it ends up to be. Now I realize in your sense you're more or less saying,
Do you like the fact that God sends people to hell?
I think that it's perfectly just.
Objective moral good,
I think,
in your opinion?
I think that is morally good because an infinitely.
But you judged that to be morally good with your own
No,
reason
I'm
inside your own
inferring
brain.
this based on the idea that God is infinitely good if God in fact exists, right? I'm steel manning God here. If God in fact exists, then he's infinitely good and infinitely just, and whatever he does is going to be, by definition, perfectly just. And that includes even the idea of hell. No, I'm saying that based off of logic. That's not me saying whether I like it or not.
No, your own logic.
Yes, but I'm following the rules of logic. I'm following the laws of logic.
No, you're following the rules of your own internal moral compass.
That's your opinion.
You judged God's opinion that you're not. It all comes from here.
But yes, but that's your opinion. That's your opinion.
It's your opinion. It's your.
But you're imposing that on me.
God has a justification to send people
That's
to
your
hell.
opinion. That you're saying that is my opinion. That's your opinion.
Is it not your opinion? Are you getting this from somewhere else?
I'm using
brain.
existential rules of logic to reason to understand,
which you have judged to be correct.
No, I know it's true because the logic follows.
No, you know it's true.
I know it's true because the logic follows.
But you've used your own reasoning to get to that conclusion.
I used reason. I didn't use my own reason. I'm using the laws of logic.
You're trapped in your brain, man. You can't get it from anywhere else. I mean, you are reasoning this stuff out. You are evaluating these laws of logic. You are evaluating God. You are evaluating everything that comes in through your five.
So how is it if I am trapped in my brain that essentially things can enter in? Does that mean those things outside don't exist at all? Are you saying that the only thing that ultimately exists is just our minds? Is that what you're getting at?
These ideas are entering through.
Okay, so ideas do exist. So there are things existential.
They're abstract concepts.
Okay, but they do exist.
They don't exist in the way you want them to exist.
Okay, but if
they don't physically exist.
I'm not saying physical. I mean, from a materialistic perspective, nothing abstract can exist.
Okay. Let's back up. Somebody says something, comes out their mouth. Right. It enters your ears. It's an idea. It's not a real thing necessarily. It's not a physical thing, but it comes in through your audio nerve and in your brain, right. And you evaluate it. Okay, so it's an idea. It creates certain thoughts in your head.
But it does still exist.
But it exists metaphorically.
But it still exists, right? Abstract.
Metaphorically.
But. Well, I mean, I realize in a sense you have to say that as a materialist, okay? But essentially you're still pointing to things that do in fact exist, and you have to use to prove your own point. To say that these things only metaphorically exist is to say that metaphorically you're true or you're right.
It's something that you can imagine inside your brain. I don't know how you go to materialism as some kind of a slight.
Well, I'm saying that if you were to say that, say, the spiritual realm exists, it would kind of degrade your materialistic worldview.
Ideas are spiritual?
Well, spiritual just means beyond the physical, so supernatural, right?
So if something exists in your imagination and suddenly you've verified a spiritual world?
If ideas actually exist, then yes, there is in fact a physical world.
They don't exist in the same way that we're using two different languages here. So something, if I can imagine something in my brain, that doesn't mean that there's something non-physical. It just means that I have imagined something.
So
That doesn't make it
do the
real.
laws of logic actually exist, or are these things just metaphors of physical things?
Well, I don't know what they would be metaphors of physical things. You'd have to show me the physical things. But the laws of logic are ideas that we have that seem to work,
Okay, so
but they're
they do
not. I
exist
don't.
though.
They exist in our conception of them. They're cognitive
So are you
tools.
saying
That
that our
doesn't mean
mind?
there's a spiritual realm. You're making a huge jump to find a spiritual realm
No,
here. They're not
no, that's
spiritual.
not at all what I'm doing. I'm trying to ask you ultimately, do you think that our minds are the ultimatum? Is that what you're saying?
The ultimatum?
Yeah,
What do you mean?
the beginning and end. So in other words, all that
Well,
float.
that's not an ultimate. An ultimatum is a choice. I don't
No,
understand why you're using
a
that word.
philosophical ultimatum. In other words, the objective standard for where things come from, the grounding of things,
Okay.
of
See,
all reality.
this is why I don't like discussing these philosophical concepts, these complicated philosophical arguments, because we are so far away from your Christian worldview here. It's not even
I
funny.
don't think so.
You, well, I mean, yeah, but it takes two here, so I don't. I think so. So you at the core of your Christian worldview want to prove that the gospel is true and get people to accept that and believe in that and get eternal life. You're so far away from that, from that
You have to
premise.
start somewhere.
Well, you're starting in a it's as when I talk to Christians that invoke complicated philosophical arguments, my impression is that if they can get you to accept these and they can shoehorn in their entire theology.
Not at all. That's
If
not even
we
what
could
I
go
want to do. I just want to focus on. I think you're making some claims that have double standards and are self defeating. So,
the fact, so you don't accept the premise that we're trapped inside of our brains?
no, that's not at all what I'm saying. I'm saying that you're essentially saying that ideas don't in essence exist is what I'm getting from you.
No, that's not at all. That's not at all what I'm saying. Like, why is this useful to uh to proving Christianity to be true? I don't understand why
Because
why anyone would argue that ideas
because
are or are not
because
material.
you shouldn't be an atheist or materialist if materialism is false. So therefore that view is false. Doesn't mean you should be a
Atheism and
Christian.
materialism are two different
Well,
things.
materialism is purely a sect in the idea of I don't believe that God exists. That's all that really is.
That's not true at all. Atheism is an empty bucket. It is simply the um, premise that I do not accept the belief in a God. Like, if you want to add anything to that, it's just not true. It doesn't follow.
Okay, so how about this question? Do you hold to the
You could
worldview?
be a material you could be a you could be someone who does not accept materialism but is also an atheist. There are
Sure.
spiritual atheists.
Sure, yes, such as some Buddhists. I forget exactly what they're called, but yes, I agree with that. But I'm saying that materialism is like like a sect of the idea of atheism. So it's considered an atheistic worldview, right?
No, I don't agree. In fact, you don't even know that I am a
I,
materialist
I
before
was
you
I
ask
was
me.
just about
So
to
to go
ask,
down this road is very
are you a
strange.
naturalist or materialist?
Naturalist or a materialist?
I mean, you could tell me if those aren't the
You
only
mean a
options.
supernaturalist or
Are you a
materialist?
supernaturalist?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Are you a naturalist?
That depends on the meaning of that.
The idea that nature is the ultimatum, is the philosophical ultimatum.
Could we discuss morality? I mean, that's kind of
Sure.
what our premise
I'm
was here.
genuinely curious. Are you, like, what do you consider your worldview?
I do my worldview. I don't have a worldview. How about
So
that?
you're a skeptic.
We, I'm a skeptic, but I don't have a world. I don't think a worldview is necessary to operate
Well,
in
I mean,
life.
you're making claims. So in that sense, you have a
What are
world.
my claims?
Well, you claim that we're stuck in our heads. You claim that
Yep.
ideas exist in a metaphorical sense. You claim that God does not exist. You claim that Jesus did not rise from the dead.
No, not. No, I claim that I don't believe God exists, not that God doesn't exist. Those are two different things. But
So are you
continue.
agnostic to the idea of God's existence?
Hey, see, look, if we get bogged down in these details, I could correct you on all kinds of
I'm
stuff,
just
like
curious.
agnosticism and
I'm just
atheism are
going
two
off
different
of
things.
colloquial definitions. That's all I'm doing.
The problem is we're getting so far away from morality here.
I mean, again, you got to start somewhere. I'm just curious. What do you consider yourself?
Well, I've given you my. Well, I'm an agnostic atheist. I don't necessarily believe in that it's possible to have knowledge that God does not exist. However, I don't believe God exists. Those are two different things. So I'm an agnostic
Okay.
atheist. But if you want to start somewhere, like I started with my premise that we're stuck inside of our head. Morality is subjective because we have to judge everything that comes into our heads to be good, to be true or false, or good or evil, and that's where we're stuck. And I said that if I want to enter your worldview and say that I have some objective moral standard intrinsically from birth, internally from God, then I can use that to judge God, and and that's where I stopped. So I think it's kind of time for you to give me your worldview. Well, not your worldview, your morality, and then we can talk about that.
Well, and
To be
I did
fair,
say that why I believe that just in part to objective morality and just the idea of it. So I explained more or less where I get the ideas from, right? If I would say it all,
where do you get the ideas from?
well, I believe that there is an ultimate uh, source of goodness, and so that's where it would drive that there is ultimate there is in fact objective grounded morality, and you can understand the specifics of it from natural and special revelation from this ultimate goodness, and that also the purpose of life given by the creator would also tell you some specifics of what is in fact good or what is right or what is wrong, which would be the definition of morality. So now that's a hypothesis. You'd go about proving that through evidence, right? So if you find evidence of, well, everyone has a sense of what is right and what is wrong ingrained in them, okay, now that's some evidence in the direction of that hypothesis, right? If you kind of put the puzzle pieces together and they all actually connect properly, now you have a good case for that hypothesis. So in that sense, I would say, like, that's why I pointed to, well, everyone has a sense of what is right and what is wrong, right? Basically, everyone would say murder
How
is
do you
wrong.
prove that? How do
You
you
could
prove that everyone has a its basic sense of right and
you
wrong?
can go around the world and you can interview people.
Okay, you are aware that psychopaths exist.
Yes, I'm saying those are the
Do
exception
they
to the
have a
rule.
basic sense of right and wrong?
Those, yes, but they are the exception to the rule. It's not that
And you
intuitively. I
okay?
would say that morality is more
But it doesn't
proved
stop. It
by
doesn't stop. It doesn't stop there.
morality is also proved by people's actions. So people believe in justice. They may not want justice for other people, but they certainly want it for themselves.
You might be able to prove that people have a sense. All people have a sense of right and wrong in a way, but you can't prove that it's all the same sense of right and wrong.
No, but
Because if you said we can go throughout the world and prove this. Well, when you do that, you find different standards everywhere.
their own perceptions of what the standard is. The only reason people would try to figure out what the specifics are is if there actually is an objective standard that exists. That's the only reason they would do
But
that.
that's not their own perceptions of the standard is not an objective standard. It's a subjective standard by definition. It's their own perceptions of it, and that proves it out in the fact that they are different standards in practice.
But what I'm saying is, in the sense, like, if I were to go outside and if you were to go outside, you would have a different perspective of what you see around you and different things that you point out. Whereas I would also do the exact same. That doesn't mean that our perceptions of it actually change what it is or even our opinions of it. Those things,
You're conflating.
no, just a second. Those things,
Okay, go ahead.
those things exist. So, like, say if I go outside, I see a road, I see some trees, okay? You point out, oh, well, there's grass, there's a sidewalk. That doesn't mean those two don't contradict. All those things still all exist, right? Those things exist regardless of my perception. Same of your perception, regardless of your perception. So the laws of
No.
morality exist regardless of our perception of what we think, which ones are right and which ones are wrong.
It's a false. I'm sorry, it's a false
How so?
analogy. You're equating a physical environment perception to a moral perception.
That's the part of an
Those are two
analogy.
completely different
It's
things.
just a metaphor. It's just to give off one
It's a
specific idea.
It's a. I don't think it's a good analogy
I mean,
because morality is completely different than a physical environment.
yeah, but that's also because you think it's subjective. But I'm saying that they're
It is
objective.
subjective.
I think it's
all
objective.
subjective.
I think it's actually grounded in
How?
something.
Okay, what's it grounded in?
It's grounded in God's character. In other words, his eternal, eternal characteristic. So ultimate goodness.
Okay, let's talk about God's eternal character, because the only source of that information is the Bible.
And
correct?
natural revelation.
Let's put natural revelation to the side for a second, because my natural revelation is what? The way I feel? The environment?
It's the world around us. So in other words,
world around
the
us?
system.
What conclusions, moral, okay, let's put that aside for part 2. God's character is accurately portrayed in the Bible. That's your position.
God's character is portrayed from a human's perspective. So from actually multiple human perspective.
So God is. So it's for humans. Therefore, it is presented in a way that humans can understand.
Yeah, I would say especially people of the culture of the time. Our culture today is so different.
Yet God is.
So it depends on the book when it was
might be
written.
different, but
the intendants.
I am the Lord thy God, I change not. And you've said that several times so far in this conversation.
Well, God by definition would never change if he exists. That's just steel manning.
So you take so I agree. Take the cultural perspectives out of this.
But those are important to understand it, because it's written by people.
Then that's a subjective morality. Then
that's not subjective. It's objective that there is a culture involved.
But if you're making allowances for that specific culture and time, then you are changing the morality to fit the time and the culture, and it won't necessarily apply to today's culture and time, making it subjective.
No, that doesn't make it subjective. That just means some things are more important to some cultures than others. Like, we don't run into the issue of, at least in America, actually maybe that might not be true, but sacrificing kids to Molech, whereas that was an issue in the Bible, and God kicked them out of that land because they did that.
What about sacrificing children to God?
In Deuteronomy, there is a specific command to the Israelites to never do anything like that.
Okay, then why did God demand that Abraham do that with his own son?
He didn't demand that he did that. He tested him.
Whatever.
But that's all from a human perspective. That's not to say that God was okay with him killing his son. That's to say that God tested him and stopped him from doing so.
All the way up to the second before he was stopped, Abraham was fully on board with God demanding that he sacrifice his own son.
Why would he think that?
Because God led him to believe that, apparently falsely. That's deception.
Is it possible that he thought that his son was rise from the dead? Because that's
you do not know
Hebrews,
the
book of Hebrews.
That is, you are assuming that. You do not
book
know
of Hebrews, chapter 12.
The book of Hebrews, written thousands of years after.
Yes, but
that was someone else's assumption about it.
Yes, but that's also your assumption about it, saying that he didn't essentially.
I'm not assuming anything. This is what frustrates me.
No, but you're assuming that God wanted him to kill his son. You're assuming that God wanted that.
That's what he told Abraham.
That's not saying he's wanted it. That's not saying he wanted him to actually kill his son.
Samuel. This is so seriously. This is where we're going to part ways here. Logically here, I don't understand why Christians do this. You read the text. The text is clear. God asked Abraham to sacrifice his son. Abraham agreed. He took him to the top of the mountain and he almost killed him at the very last second. God's like, psych, didn't mean it, stops him. Abraham completely believed it. God is either a child murderer or he is a liar. You can claim it's a test, and you can claim that later on Hebrews it said something else, but Hebrews came way after it. The text itself did not say any of the things that you're claiming.
It also doesn't say what you're claiming, in the sense that God
What am I
wanted
claiming?
him to kill him. God told him
That's what
to.
Abraham believed.
Yeah, why would he do that? Why would he fall into something like that? Why is it the writers would specifically point out something like this when later in Deuteronomy, like Moses knows about this, and later in Deuteronomy, yet somehow God says, oh, by the way, don't sacrifice your children to me because that's wrong. Why would he purposefully do that, knowing the idea of how these Israelites would realize God wants to murder children?
Because why would he? Because the Bible's inconsistent in its messaging all the time.
Right. They're definitely that ignorant. No, these people are geniuses.
No,
They
the Bible's
understand it.
inconsistent. It's not the people, it's the Bible that's being inconsistent. It's different writers writing different things, not being consistent.
So you don't think that Joshua and Moses weren't involved in the writing of Genesis from God-given revelation and also in the writing of Deuteronomy? If in fact,
that's a separate debate.
Well, technically yes, but we're kind of assuming that the Bible's true here. Okay, you kind of have to do that to go into morality. To say it's inconsistent is to assume that it's actually true in the first place. It doesn't matter if it's inconsistent if all of it's just fiction. That doesn't matter at all. It's not immoral at all.
Look, I'm simply entering your worldview to do an internal critique.
So you think that you're assuming it's true just for the sake of the arguments, right?
Sure.
Okay. So assuming that it is true, then Moses and Joshua are involved in the writing of Genesis and also Deuteronomy. How would they not know this? In fact, they were very smart people, if in fact they existed.
Wait, okay, but why would I assume that they wrote it if it doesn't say that they wrote it?
It does say that they wrote it. It says that.
Where does it say that?
Well, in Numbers and I believe also Exodus and Leviticus, talks about Joshua being Moses' scribe, and Moses actually.
Yeah, but where does it say? Sorry to interrupt you. It's just I can't see you right now.
Yeah,
so
sorry.
I have to. It's a little difficult to perceive cues here. Where does it say that Genesis, the book of Genesis, was written by Moses or Joshua?
It's more or less just a good assumption, I guess. I mean, just like other books written by Paul, we assume.
Are there good assumptions?
Yeah. Well, as Moses. Oh, yeah, they're great assumptions. I'm assuming that my camera's working.
You have to assume it with evidence, though. Yeah,
right.
No reason
but I have evidence. I would say that just as Moses was on the Mount and God had written the Ten Commandments on a tablet, and also another time Moses had ingrained it into tablets, that also God tells him to put the book of the law. Actually, no, he does actually say in Leviticus to write these. Actually, no, it's Exodus. He said to write down these laws to remember them and to place them in the ark. So scholars assume that God also gave him the revelation in Genesis because of the flow of the writing. It's the same style. It's the same style of writing. Genesis seems as an account as if to speak to a Jewish generation that just came out of Egypt. There are other specific reasons, but I can't remember right off the top of my head.
I get that. But this is a huge problem with the Bible, and it's that most of the Bible does not say who's actually writing it. Like if we had some introductions, if we had some explicit statements, that would go a lot further than what we do have. And nowhere in Genesis does it say who's actually writing that book. So you can make assumptions, you can try to connect dots. The fact is, neither one of us know for a fact who wrote that book from the book itself, from the internal test from the book itself. And if you want to get outside that book and use the external test, it gets a lot weirder. The fact is, anybody reading the book has no idea who's writing it. It's not clear.
I think it's pretty clear. I mean, Moses did the majority of the speaking. Those kinds of people would have had scribes.
Jesus did the majority of the speaking in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and we know darn sure he wasn't writing that.
Yeah, but that's not what I'm pointing out. I'm pointing out that he probably had a scribe to write down what he spoke so that these things would be remembered. In fact, many times, God said to remember and Moses as well, to remember and to meditate on the ideas of the law and the law itself, and that's only really possible if they had it written down. And God told them in Exodus to write down this law, and so that they would not forget it, and to put it into the Ark of the Covenant. So they were preserved in that sense.
Samuel, do you really honestly think that Moses wrote the Pentateuch? Really?
I think Joshua was his scribe. I think there's some indicators of that. So I think maybe Moses might have written some of it.
That Joshua, okay, both together, you really believe they both wrote the Pentateuch?
I would say, yeah, Genesis through Deuteronomy. I also the fact that Moses dies at the end of Deuteronomy, and Joshua kind of almost like finishes it off and then continues into Joshua, and then
I get that, but like you grew up being told this.
No, right? I genuinely believe it based off of evidence.
I know you genuinely believe it. I know you believe it, but you grew up being taught this though as well.
Well, yeah, but that doesn't mean it's false.
That doesn't mean it's false, but you grew up being taught this. Now, what you've grown up being taught is the opposite of what the scholarly consensus says about these books.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
No, I mean, like
the scholarly consensus of people who have spent their life's work working on the Old Testament, trying to figure it out, have said that Moses is not a real figure and did not write these books.
That doesn't mean it's.
So you are juxtaposing your indoctrination against the scholarly consensus.
No, I think there's actually good evidence that Moses did exist. So.
Okay, and that evidence is internal or external?
I think there's also some external.
What would that external evidence be? Is there any archaeology with Moses associated with it at all? So I'm all ears.
Yeah, there's a lot that I've actually talked to you about already, like the just some of the stuff that Inspiring Philosophy went over about the Exodus, but I would say also
but the name Moses didn't occur in any of that stuff.
Yes, but
let's be clear about what Inspiring Philosophy said. Inspiring Philosophy has what do you call it? I forgot the word, but it's like circumstantial. He has tons of circumstantial evidence for the Exodus. He does not have archaeological evidence for the existence of Moses personally.
I mean, yes, but you don't necessarily need the exact name. Like, if you have the exact name, you kind of know, okay, absolutely, this person existed. May not be.
You kind of need the name. I mean, we don't write books about anonymous figures and then make names later. I mean, we kind of need the name.
But his name is in the book, and that is part of the piece of evidence. The fact that
in the Bible.
Yeah, but I mean, to say that
the Bible. Okay, let's be clear. I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you. I'm not trying to.
No, I know you can't see my mouth.
I have difficulty with this. The Bible is the claim, and then it needs evidence to prove it. So if you say, well, Moses is in the Bible, yeah, we agree on that. But that's the claim. It's the writing. I need to see the evidence that supports the claim.
I would say the writing itself, the way that it's written, like say it's not written just to prescribe ideas, but describe, that would be more internal. External ideas like say even the what is it called, the Merneptah Sealy, just a very old reference to the Israelite nation. It's not to say exactly that Moses himself existed, but that the Israelites as a nation existed during that time. Even just, I have an archaeological study Bible that actually mentioned one piece that I was not aware of. It is a metal scroll discovered. It was like 1979 by a Jew. Actually, maybe it was 59. I can get my Bible if you want and read the specifics on it, but it actually took them 3 years to unscroll it because it was so old. But they found that it was actually the priests. I think it was like the priests. Like how they would be instituted. I can't think of the word right now, but it's Numbers. I think it's chapter 3, verses 13 through 15, and it was dated to about, it was like 400 years prior to the Dead Sea Scrolls. So they dated it to about late 700s BC. So it was really neat.
Okay.
And that, I would say, kind of puts closer to that Numbers.
I totally get it, but this is tangential to Moses as its historical
Sure.
character. So what you're telling me is that you found archaeological evidence for the Midwest, American Midwest, and then you're saying, well, that proves Paul Bunyan was a real character. There's such a thing as folklore. You would have to find evidence for the character of Paul Bunyan in order to prove or try to prove that he was a real character.
Sure.
Simply finding the Midwest and archaeological evidence for that region does not prove the character specifically. So
Right.
until you have something specific to Moses is an assumption.
Right. Even like David was assumed until they found a coin with his name on it. It took a lot of.
Yeah, and I believe that's in dispute also.
I'm sure a lot of it is, but.
Well, just finding a single. So this is a big problem for me for the truth of Christianity, because if Israel during that time of David ruled that massive area, that, if everything is accurate from Kings and Chronicles, and Israel is such a world power, and David was ruling all of these nations and was such an epic figure, I would expect a lot of archaeological evidence
3,000 years ago.
That. Sure, we've got Egypt,
right,
that many years ago.
A lot of corrupted documents too.
We know all about the pharaohs way before David.
Well,
but we can't find anything except a single solitary coin with maybe that word David on it. Come on, man.
Well, first of all, you have to realize that, and this is something that I kind of learned recently, is that archaeologists have really only dug through, like they said, like 1% of the Middle East, and it's just, there's so much more that they have to go through. You're talking about like, government.
So you're assuming that everything that needs to be found is still waiting to be found.
I think there's certainly a lot more to be found. If you talk to any archaeologist.
So far, but so far you have nothing. It's like saying, well, we have.
No, there isn't nothing.
It's like saying we have searched as far as we can in outer space and we found no life. But there's so much left to outer space that we're just going to go ahead and assume not only that there's life out there, but there's like all these civilizations and all these aliens, and we're going to make up crazy stories about them when we haven't found anything.
No, but
yet.
There is something though, like such as the coin, such as the scroll of Numbers being found, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and also.
But Samuel, this is important, man. You could say there's 1% that's only been looked at, but we know exactly where the kingdom of David was supposed to have occurred, and we have done the archaeological diggings in those areas, and we found nothing.
But that's, well, again, I disagree with that, but also these things have been destroyed, and in biblical history, destroyed constantly and rebuilt and destroyed. Even just like the destruction of the temple, they destroyed many of the scrolls.
We know so much about the other nations in that area, though. During and before that time, we know so much. So to say, well, it was destroyed, yeah, but we're able to recover it.
But
we're able to recover nothing.
I just don't think that's true. I've heard so many, even atheistic, skeptic Archaeologists say that there is more evidence for Israel existence and the Bible being historical than other nations and their texts being true. Like, I've heard that from archaeologists after archaeologists after archaeologists, and maybe it's
No
just
one
the
is
specific
disputing.
guys we're listening to, but even like the
No one,
existence
no,
of
no one,
Jesus, right? That's a
Samuel.
scholarly.
No one's disputing. No one's disputing the existence of
But I'm
Israel.
not
They're
saying that.
disputing the
I'm saying
they're disputing the characters described in the Bible and the massive kingdoms they were supposed to have represented. That's what's being disputed is the
right,
specific claims of the Bible, not the existence of Israel.
right. But I'm saying that that the Bible that they will say that the Bible is historical to a point. They will not necessarily say that the supernatural claims are true, but that it's very likely that these people actually
It's
existed.
it's not a supernatural claim that King David existed
Oh
and
no, I'm
ruled
saying
this massive
the
kingdom.
supernatural claims within the Bible. So such as like
But I'm not talking about that stuff. I'm talking about the archaeology.
I know, but I'm saying that I've heard many archaeologists say that. I mean, this is a very broad and general claim. I think this is why we tried to focus more on morality, and we like went off from
Well,
that.
yeah, you want to. We could get back to that any second. I got no issue with that because I want to put your morality to the test here. You claim that God is objective and unchanging and has this moral standard. And my claim before was that if you actually take the Bible and you drill down into the details of what God's morality represents in the Scripture, it is counter to everything that you claim is an objective moral
Here
standard.
is something that I think is really important, a very important question, and something that I kind of ignored, which I really shouldn't have. Why in the world should we judge God by the same standard that we are judged by?
Because God has given you a standard.
So hold on a second, but I mean the specifics. Why is it God is bound by the same rules as we are, even though, physically speaking, if God exists, he's not even bound to the same realm, right? An infinite, timeless, immaterial
You
being.
don't know that. You don't
If
know
he
that.
exists, he's not bound by those rules. We're
God
assuming
said,
that he
but
exists.
God is setting the example for you though. By his own actions, you judge him.
Jesus Christ set the example for human beings and how they should live
Okay, he's God. He's God.
in
Judge him.
human
Judge him by his
flesh.
own standard.
But why can't God take someone from earth into the spiritual realm? Why is that wrong?
Wait, what?
Why is it wrong? Because a lot of times, or all throughout this, you kind of claim that God killing people is wrong, but yet why is
I didn't say that. I did never said that. We haven't gotten to that
okay?
part.
Okay, so you didn't say that, but why is it wrong for God to essentially do anything at all when if morality is subjective, there's nothing really right or wrong? Why isn't it God in his own mind can't do whatever he wants?
Has God given you a standard of morality that does not apply to him?
But that doesn't work in your worldview.
No, that's a question. That's a question. Has God given you a standard of morality that does not apply to him as
He's
well?
also given you that.
No,
So
hold on.
yes, he has.
It's a yes or no. It's a yes or no.
Yes,
Does God's standard of morality not apply to God?
a human morality placed or not essentially placed upon us.
Nope. You're not going to get out of this, man. You got to tell me yes or no. Does God give you a standard of morality that does not apply to God
Your
as well?
question is assuming too much. You're essentially.
I'm not assuming anything. Has God given you a standard of morality that doesn't apply to
In
him?
special revelation, God has given human beings. I'm trying to answer this properly.
Samuel, you're really no. This is a yes or no.
Why does it have to be a yes or no?
You could say no and then expand on it.
I mean,
has God given you a standard of morality that he is apart from?
Yes, in a sense. How about that? Oh, okay. My keys are here, and the part is here. Thank you. Appreciate it, Dad. Sorry, I guess my mechanic's here, and my dad's handing him the parts, so.
Okay.
But yes, in a sense, yes.
Yes, meaning that God's morality to humans doesn't apply to God.
You can't pose the question like that because you're essentially saying that
Why not? You
because
can
human
pose a
beings
question
are
any
in a
way you
different
want.
position, a different position of authority, have a different purpose. So therefore, what is right and what is wrong for human beings is different, just like what is right and what is wrong for animals is different. And it's all based on the purpose of life. So
So you're saying that God can give commandments not to kill and then order genocide in the next verse, and that's totally fine. That God breaks His own moral standard because it doesn't apply to Him. So we're dealing with two levels of morality here,
not
because that means I don't know what God's morality is. If what He's presented in the Bible doesn't apply to Him, I have no clue what His
let me
morality
ask you
actually
this.
is, what His standard is.
This is what I'm really trying to portray to you. If if a policeman is chasing after a criminal, is he allowed to run a red light to chase after that criminal?
So it would be helpful if you didn't use analogies, because analogies are never going to be perfect. So if you could just tell me what applies to God and what doesn't, that would be helpful.
What I'm ultimately saying is that because God has given us life and he is in higher authority over us, if he takes our lives, it is perfectly morally just because he can do it whenever he wants because he gave us life in the first place.
So God is operating by a standard of morality for himself that I am unaware of and he hasn't articulated. I just have to watch him be a hypocrite and then assume, well, that's God. He can do whatever he wants.
It's not hypocrisy when he's not bound by the same laws that we are.
But he never makes that clear. He never says I'm not bound by the laws.
Have you read Job?
He makes moral claims.
Job.
And then he doesn't follow them.
No, he says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. You shall not murder. You shall not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain.
But he can.
Why couldn't he? Even
the
arbitrarily.
Is that he can?
Even though he doesn't arbitrarily.
So he gives me a standard, and it's the only way that I can evaluate morality.
No, that's how you know what is right and wrong for ultimately according to your purpose in life. So what I'm saying is that God is not bound by those rules because he's not bound by the same purpose. Whereas he created us, so he gives us purpose.
So from my flawed human perspective, trapped inside my own brain, I see this God as a divine dictator of a third world country that says, hey, here are the laws, you better follow them or I'll quash you. But at the same time, I'm not going to follow any of them myself. And it's just not, and I'm above it. And there's nothing you can do about it because I have the power and you don't. Now, anybody in that position would say this is outrageous and we should lead a revolution and stop this.
That's right.
The only way that I have to evaluate.
So, this. but that's purely subjective from your worldview.
Of course, it's subjective.
But that's everything. That's okay. Objectively Daniel, wrong in my worldview, and God doesn't do that.
Can you give me an example of something that is objective?
Well, if I say God, does that count?
No, because that's not an idea.
The laws of life. Oh, it is an idea, but you don't necessarily ascribe to the idea.
It's out of the context. It's out of the context of what I'm asking for. Can you give me something that's objective?
Logic. The laws of logic, laws of nature.
Okay, and they are objective.
And that they don't change in accordance with what they don't change. It's not that there aren't exceptions to the rules. It's that there's nothing that actually contradicts them directly. They're constant.
Okay. Can you give me an example of a moral, some sort of moral action that's objective?
I mean, rape is objectively wrong. Treating others the way you want.
Great. I'm so glad you mentioned that. Okay. Why do you think rape is objectively wrong?
I believe that rape is objectively wrong because people are made in the image of God, and putting other people lower than that is essentially breaking that code, that ought of you should put people to the standard that ultimately God has placed them in. So, like,
does the Bible ever say that rape is objectively wrong?
Yes.
So in Numbers 31:17, where the Israelites were ordered to kill all of the opposing force and the population of that country, and including the little ones and the children, but they were commanded specifically to keep the virgins for themselves. Any woman who had not known man. What do you think that meant?
That's not directly rape.
You think that those virgins were not taken and
And married.
used?
I mean, they might have been used wrongly. That's not to say that the Israelites follow God's
Used
command
wrongly?
perfectly.
What is
Well,
what does used wrongly mean? You mean raped?
I mean, are you saying that like that's to say that the Israelites follow God's law perfectly, but clearly they didn't, and even they were punished for not following God's law perfectly. They even agreed.
They were punished. Yeah, you're right, Samuel. They were punished because they didn't initially kill every living thing in that country, and so Moses admonished them and said, "How dare you violate God's
Yes, and
command
killed all
and
the Israelites.
keep the children alive."
Yes.
So they killed all of the children.
Yes, and told them to not intermarry too. And also told them, by the way, yeah, the next verse, don't intermarry. And also, then if you disobey, you'll all be killed, and then continues to not kill them. It's exaggerative language.
You need to read Numbers 31:17.
I have.
That's not what it says.
It's exaggerative language and metaphorical, but also
the virgins for yourselves.
As people you're supposed to marry. That's not saying that God is allowing rape.
Oh, is that what that said?
That's not what it's saying. You could.
So you've conquered. You. This is how Christian morality just is to me is disgusting that you make excuses for this stuff. You have conquered a people. You have slaughtered their entire population. You've killed the children, and your God says, "Keep the virgins for yourselves." And you're then making excuses saying, "Well, they married them."
Sure. Listen, I hate to I mean, I realize we're kind of getting argumentative here, but I want to.
You're right.
First of all, please don't swear. I know it happens. But one thing I did want to point out.
Why is swearing wrong?
I don't. Well, let's just say this.
Hey, it's a morality.
I don't want it on my channel. How about that?
Okay.
Why
is it wrong?
Because if you are to hold other people above yourself and put yourself lower, you can offend someone in a cultural sense of, say, using like an offensive word such as, BS, and then you're essentially putting that other person below yourself and therefore breaking an ought. So which would be the ought of?
Yeah, you've completely lost me.
The ought is to say, even as Paul says, esteem others better than yourselves, or to not let any... to not allow any what he didn't use the word perverted, but man, I'm so brain dead today. But don't let any wicked communication proceed out of your mouth. But then that is all in accordance with the idea that you should treat your neighbor as yourself. And you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. If you love your neighbor as yourself,
I am treating you as myself, because they've done studies that show that people that use strong language and curse are actually more honest than people that don't.
That's probably because you let it all out.
As honest as possible here. I do let it all out.
Well,
yeah, maybe we're going too hard here. We need to walk this back, because I don't want to be too aggressive to you, and then you won't want to talk to me anymore. I see where that can go.
Yeah. Well, and it's not like I wouldn't want to talk to you. I just really don't want it on my channel. So that's more of a side issue of why I think that.
Well, I get that, but it's not you're not the one saying it.
Yeah.
So are you afraid of YouTube demonetization?
No.
I don't think you're going to.
I don't want my audience to hear it.
And your audience, can't handle it? They're too sensitive?
No.
Come on, man. This is the real world.
I know. I hear it all the time. It doesn't mean that I like it. Just because, say, if I were to see someone who is, say, having intercourse outside, doesn't mean I think it's okay. So
That's not exactly the
it's an
same
extreme
thing.
example, but it's still the same idea. I'm just saying that just because I hear it all the time doesn't mean it's okay. So,
I think it's okay.
I mean, sure, that's why you said it, but
I don't.
I'm
It's
just
not a
asking
magic
you,
word,
please don't swear when I'm recording. I can still cut it out,
and
but
that's what I would like to discuss is that specific thing because that is a moral claim.
okay. Well, I
That
told
is
you why
something
I
that you
think
don't
it's
think is
wrong.
right.
I think it's wrong because in accordance with the idea that you should esteem others as you or better than yourself, and that it can be offensive to swear. It's possible to put someone else down. So, in the Christian worldview, if it is true, you should aim to be at peace with all men and you should aim to not offend anyone. And so, you should aim to be as inoffensive and as kind and humble while still sharing the truth and being honest.
Does the S word offend you?
It doesn't offend me personally, no, but it might offend someone else. So, I'm just thinking of the
Why would
other
it
person.
offend someone? Why would it offend someone else? This is a moral claim. Let's discuss it.
I know a lot of Christians who are offended by swear words.
Why?
Um, because it's culturally inappropriate.
Culturally, but is cultural equal to morality?
In the sense that it is culturally inappropriate, which is objectively true, and it is these people are objectively offended, and biblically you shouldn't aim to offend anyone. You should try your best not to offend someone or to offend someone. Therefore, it is wrong when you say let loose, and you say gossip of someone or even swear, and that person's here
Let's
and that.
not get too far. Let's not get too far afield. Is this a cultural claim or a moral
It
claim?
is a moral claim, but culture is involved.
It's either.
It can't just be either or. Things are more complex. There's always a black and white at the beginning and end, but it doesn't mean that in between.
So morality is related to culture.
Morality is involved, or sorry, culture is involved, but it's not necessarily, say, a direct derivative of
Come on,
morality.
Samuel. Take a step. Just take a stand on this. Is using the S word immoral, moral, or just cultural?
It is immoral in today's culture, specifically in America. Yes, it is objectively immoral in that area. So,
It's objectively immoral because it's cultural.
because it in the culture, it can offend people, and if people are offended because you were essentially slipping up and not controlling yourself as you should have been, then
So
that means you did something wrong. So therefore,
offending people culturally is immoral.
yes,
How so? How do you determine that? What's your objective moral standard for
because you are supposed to, because people are created in the image of God, you're supposed to not only hold them to the same level as you, but you are also to esteem others greater than yourself and humble yourself below them. And you are also to aim for as much peace as possible without any offense, with as much as possible. And that means that if you could perfectly say something without using swear words, right? I could even just apologize and fix that issue, but I can say many things truthfully in humble ways that don't offend
that?
people.
Okay.
So you
I don't want to
aim
get
for
too,
not
too
offending people.
I don't want to get too lengthy here. So what you're saying is that if you go to a different culture and they're doing something that is immoral, and you tell them that they can't do that, you're offending them culturally. You therefore are violating your own.
What I'm saying is that you should aim for not offending people as much as possible, and when you don't do that, you're breaking an ought, which would be essentially you are being immoral.
And an ought that I do not subscribe
Sure.
to.
I mean, you think morality is subjective, so it doesn't. There's not really any oughts in that term, but that's not my point. I'm just telling you
That's a straw man. We have
No,
not
that's
covered
not
that.
a straw man. If everything's
Yeah, it is.
subjective,
You claiming that I have no odds
yeah,
is not something that I have admitted to.
you may have a subjective ought, but it's not grounded in something that is eternal, unchanging.
It's grounded in the same exact thing that yours is grounded in, your own brain. You
That's your
cannot get out of
opinion.
that. It's a fact. How do you find your way out of that?
What do you mean? The laws of
You have accepted the premise that you're trapped inside your brain and you can't know anything for sure except what you experience. Is that true or false?
I in the sense of experience, I guess I can't say that I know that for sure as much as that I know I 100% that I exist because I can think and I can consider things.
Which is your experience.
Sure, let's put it down to that. But I'm saying that I know I exist because I can think, because I can reason. So even the fact that that idea exists, I know I exist.
We're agreed on that.
Right.
We're agreed on that. But every single thing outside of your brain has to enter into your brain and get evaluated by your brain. You're trapped in your brain.
Just like,
is that true or false?
It is true that I have to interpret for myself to understand. That doesn't mean that other things outside don't still exist. It just means that for myself to understand.
But you can't be sure if they exist or not. You have evaluated them.
Well, I'm using them. So, I mean, that gives me some really good reason to exist, to say they exist.
My point is everything that exists is subjective to you, including morality.
But you're imposing that idea on me.
Is it not true? Is it true or not?
It's not true because it's self-defeating, because it's a double standard.
How is it self-defeating?
Because you have to impose that on someone else for it to be true, which means that it's self-defeating.
I'm not imposing, Samuel, I'm not imposing that on you. I am asking you to evaluate the thing that I have just presented you with and tell me if it is true or not.
It's false.
You are trapped inside your brain. True or false?
No, it's true that I exist inside of myself, and that my existence is bound to myself in this current state. But what you said is that everything is subjective, and you said that everything has to come through.
Everything. Okay, let's just take this premise by premise. Okay, very carefully. Okay, true or false? You are trapped inside of your brain.
I would say, in a sense, true.
Well, in a sense, how is it not true?
In the sense that it's possible that I have existence in another realm that I'm not aware of, but I would just assume.
Really?
I mean, it's possible philosophically.
It's possible philosophically? How do you know that?
I just came up with the idea. Therefore, it's possible philosophically. These are just abstract ideas.
You just came up with the idea. So some things are possible.
I didn't just came up with it. No, I've thought of this many times. This is an existential thought. So.
But you're okay, and you're evaluating that thought that you had with what?
I don't think it's reasonable.
You're evaluating it with your brain.
Yes. So therefore, my brain is working. So I think therefore I am.
Okay. Correct. We're still on the same page.
Yeah, here. But it's assuming too much to make that proposition that you're stuck inside your brain, because the one thing you could be 100% sure about is that you exist because you're able to think. That doesn't mean you're trapped.
Wherever your experience is happening, you're stuck in that experience. You're talking to me right now. So there's external to yourself information is entering into your mind. Let's just use mind instead of brain. Okay, you're trapped in your mind. Every single thing that you're hearing me say has to come in to your mind through your senses and be evaluated. You're stuck inside there. Is that true or false?
In the sense that my own personhood is stuck inside of this specific.
Your mind.
I don't think a soul's stuck inside of a mind, but I think your mind is connected to your soul and your spirit. But those are just not semantics, but I guess specifics that don't really matter. The point is that I myself am in this area and I'm stuck at this current moment. Sorry, I'm making you frustrated.
Well, it is frustrating because I think you're trying to analyze this too far to try to find a loophole out of this. So let me just put it way more clearly. Way more clearly. Okay, the Bible is a book, contains information. You have had to intake that information into your brain through your five senses and evaluate it to be true or false. Correct?
Correct.
Therefore, the Bible is subjective to your thoughts about it.
No, because it could the truth needs to be intaked, which means it's external. So that means I need to intake external ideas, and if those ideas exist, that in fact is true, which means true exist.
They are subjective to your evaluation.
No, they still exist outside of me.
But they are subjected to your evaluation.
To my understanding, but not to actual existence. So they still exist. That's how I'm able to take them in, right? If they didn't exist, I wouldn't be able to take them in. If they were just subjective, I wouldn't be able to take them in because they would only exist inside of my head, but they exist outside as I'm taking them in. So
yeah, we got that far. I'm just trying to understand why I'm having such trouble here. I'm trying to figure out a way to put this in terms where you'll get it.
I do feel that way when I'm talking to you about morality. No offense, but
okay. The contents of the Bible are subjective to your understanding. They have to be your interpretation, how you evaluate them. They are subjective to that.
Specifically, my personal interpretation, but not your interpretation. Doesn't mean those.
We're talking about you. We're talking about individuals here. You.
Yes, but
you.
Yes, but it doesn't mean that those things therefore don't exist externally. Because again, if I have to,
I didn't say that.
Okay.
What I meant is that your interpretation, the Bible is subjective, because you personally have to take in the information in the Bible and you have to evaluate it according to your own internal standard, and you have to make judgments about it. It is subjective.
Is that idea subjectively true? That you just said.
What?
That idea that you gave off, that presumption, is that subjectively or objectively true?
Why don't you tell me if you accept what I said or not?
No, I know, but I'm trying to answer it with listen.
You're making it weird.
No. If you make a claim, you're claiming that that's true objectively. I made
a claim, and I'm asking for you to evaluate my claim and say if I'm right or wrong.
I think that you're wrong. Yeah, I think that you're wrong. The Bible is not subjective.
How?
In that if I have to take them into myself to understand them, the ideas, that means that the ideas exist outside of myself.
Correct.
So that means that they're objective.
They might exist, yes, but you have to evaluate them.
To understand them, but that doesn't mean they're still not true, regardless of my own understanding.
Correct, but you can't. But it's only true to the degree with which you can evaluate it using your own brain power.
So
it's subjective to your interpretation of it.
But that only matters for me. That doesn't matter for external truth. That's totally different.
That's what we're talking about. We're talking about you. So will you agree that there's almost limitless interpretations of the Bible that people all over the world throughout time have come to that disagree? Like one person can read the Bible and they get a different message, and another person can read the Bible and get a different message.
Just like my interpretation of your words, that's why you're having some trouble here, because it's our different interpretations according to our worldviews. So, yeah.
You're right. That's why everything is subjective.
No, that doesn't mean the ideas are
trapped. It has
to be.
Then
why are we trying to figure them out if or not they're true? Because we would be seeking the idea of objectivity. So that means that nothing is.
You're assuming that there is an objective standard to pursue in the first place.
No, I'm not assuming.
That's also a subjective interpretation.
Well, I mean, yes, I'm assuming off the idea that you're making a claim and you're creating ideas and it's flowing to my head. You're using the laws of logic. It's flowing to my head. So I know that these things exist. I know that there's good reason to believe that these things exist because you're literally using those laws to essentially give me ideas, to externally give me thought, right? Give me ideas. So therefore, I know those things exist outside of myself, right?
You're claiming there's an objective standard outside of yourself, but that in itself is a subjective interpretation of it.
But I know it's objectively true because I know that idea.
You can't know that.
Yes, I can know that. Just like I know I exist.
You're not objective. You can't know that.
I myself am not objectively existing.
Correct. So you're subjectively existing.
So in other words, I think therefore I am isn't true.
That's not objective. That's subjective to you.
That's
you can know. I think therefore I am. I know that. I think therefore I am. That's not objective though. That's a subjective statement. I think therefore I am.
But that's objective.
From me.
But that's objective that it's according to you. Or in other words, I know this is a contradictory claim.
You can accept my statement or you can reject my statement on your own terms, but it is a subjective statement from me. I think, therefore,
therefore, it doesn't apply to me if it's subjective. If it's a subjective claim from you, it doesn't apply to me.
You're right. And I'm
so
talking
it's
about
false.
what applies to people.
If it's a subjective claim coming from you, that means that if you give that claim to me, it's automatically false because it's subjective only to you. It's not subjective to me. So therefore, it's false.
You're assuming it's false. I don't follow how you can just assume it's false.
Well, because you said that the claims that you make are subjective, right?
Right.
Okay, so if it's subjective, that means it's not true for me. So that means all the claims that you make are.
It depends on how you. It depends on how you evaluate. You can evaluate it to be false. You can evaluate it to be true, but it's not automatically false. Just
is that idea that you just made, that claim, objectively true or subjectively true?
Subjective. Subjective.
Okay,
subjective.
So in other words, it's not true. It's only true for you.
No, it could be true.
So it could be true objectively, but it's certainly subjectively true. Is that what you're saying?
It's always going to be subjective. It could be subjectively true for you. It could be subjectively. I could make a subjective statement about myself that you could also subjectively accept as true.
So what you're saying is that a subjective claim can apply to everyone, which is a contradictory of ideas. So
my claim is that there are no objective claims, period.
So is that claim objectively true?
That's subjective.
So it's objectively false. In other words, it doesn't apply to everyone. That's what I mean by objective.
If you want it to subjectively apply to you, you can accept it.
But does it apply to everyone? What you just said, does that apply to everyone?
If I say yes, what I'll just say it's subjective.
Well, if it's subjective, it doesn't apply to everyone. But if it applies to everyone, then it's not subjective by definition.
I subjectively believe it applies to everyone.
Okay, but that's subjective, which means that only applies to you.
You're right.
So that doesn't apply to everyone.
It can apply to you. It could apply to you if you subjectively.
But if all claims are subjective, that means that the claim itself, all claims are subjective, doesn't apply to everyone.
So?
That means that nothing's really right or wrong.
That's a possibility.
Okay,
right and wrong is a label we use.
Okay, so essentially, I think therefore I am is wrong, right? So you don't exist.
No, I said it's subjective.
But you have to backtrack. This is how you do geometry, even deductive reasoning.
Geometry is not a morality.
No, but it's good philosophy.
Science with humanity.
It's good philosophy. We're probably gonna.
Geometry is philosophy now.
Well, geometry is the philosophy of math. It's the grounding of it.
How about Samuel? How about you defend the actions of your God in the Bible in some way?
I don't need to.
I can subjectively.
But
Look, I have given my basis for morality again and again in different ways.
Yeah.
All morality. My claim is that all morality is relative to the individual because we're trapped inside of our brains, having to evaluate every single thing that comes into our brains. There's no way out of this. It's a closed system. What is your system of objective morality?
My system of objective morality is that it's bound in God's character, and that even my own
What is God's character?
God's character is goodness, which is, well, I mean, goodness is more of the general claim. You can get into specifics of what goodness is, but it's not evil because goodness is something. Evil is a lack of goodness. It's a lack of it.
How do you know that God is good?
Because if God exists, by definition, an infinite being, therefore he cannot be evil because evil is a lack of goodness, which means therefore that God is in fact only good.
Why couldn't an infinite being be evil?
Because an infinite being lacks nothing by definition, which means
so he lacks evil?
No. You misunderstand. The idea of evil is that evil is a lack of goodness. It's a lack thereof.
Goodness is a lack of evil.
No, it's not. Goodness is something. Evil is a lack of it.
Evil is something.
Just like nothing isn't something, nothing is a lack of something, right? So
just because you define it that way, man, you could just as easily say that evil.
I'm just expressing ideas. I'm just expressing ideas. You can interpret it a different way.
Isaiah 45:7. I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things.
And
so God has evil as an attribute. He's the one that creates it. He's the one. It's part of his character.
Have you ever heard of poetry, which is actually what that is? If you were to read that in the original Hebrew.
Oh, you mean I didn't subjectively interpret it the right way?
No, just like you didn't subjectively understand even my other claims before. So yeah, I completely disagree. Right. It is a metaphor because it's poetry.
Oh, you mean I've got to determine scripture by scripture what's metaphor?
No, in other words, you need to use your mind and you need to understand the culture. You need to understand the context.
I need to use my mind to interpret it.
And no, you need to actually think through it properly with proper deductive reasoning.
Oh, so there's things I need. There's
so
some kind of rubric I need to have before I can evaluate it.
Yes, doesn't mean it's true for me, or doesn't mean it's just because you evaluate it as false doesn't mean it's false in general. It just means that you evaluated it as false.
I'd have to evaluate that rubric before and determine that it's correct before I can use it, which means it's subjective to my own interpretation.
No, that doesn't mean it's not objectively true. That just means that you.
I'll bet if I get this wrong, I'm probably going to end up in a lake of fire too.
That's why we're having this discussion. Really that's why we're having this discussion, because I care about you.
There's really high stakes on this. So I've got to make sure that this is absolutely correct. So I need some sort of infallible truth detection method.
You know, if the Muslims are right, I'm going to their hell.
You're probably going to the Christian hell just because there's so many different interpretations of this stuff.
Yeah.
And narrow is the gate.
Yeah.
So why do you think narrow is the gate doesn't apply to Christians too?
Well, I think it applies to people who say they're Christians, but they're really not. In fact, that's talked about in Revelation.
You say you're a Christian.
Oh, of course I claim that.
Apply to you? How do you know? How do you know you found the narrow path?
Well, Christian means little Christ or follower of Christ, and I follow Jesus, and I have as an indicator, a spiritual indicator, God's Spirit dwells within me, just as like I feel the air around me, I know that I know that my hand exists in front of me, I know that God exists inside of me. So that's an indicator.
You could be wrong.
I could be wrong. I could be wrong that my hand exists. That would essentially be what you're saying.
So you are equating your hand, the existence of your hands, to what?
To the existence of God inside of me.
To the existence of God inside of you. So you can hold up your hand, and this is pretty obvious, man.
Yep.
But can you demonstrate God inside of you in the same way?
Just like the fact that.
So why am I not seeing it?
Because not everything's physical. Even just, you can't see the wind, but it still blows. You see the effect of it.
You equated it with your hand.
Yeah.
This is obvious.
Yes.
This is obvious.
Yeah. I think it's very obvious that I'm a Christian. I could go to work, meet a totally new coworker, and they realize that I'm a Christian even before and have even atheists I actually tell me how great of a great morally a person I am and how great an
Well,
example I am.
you can claim that you're a Christian and you're going to heaven, but you could very well have gotten the interpretation just enough incorrect that you're actually going to hell because narrow is the gate.
That's why I don't trust myself. I trust in Jesus.
You don't trust yourself,
I don't
but you yourself are the one telling me
I
these
don't trust
things.
in
You
myself
don't trust yourself.
morally. I don't trust in myself to some extension.
Samuel, does water baptism is that a requirement for salvation?
It's not biblical, so no.
So, because it's not biblical, your interpretation of it. Yet you're aware that there are a vast number of Baptists that claim that it is absolutely biblical and required for salvation. And if you're not baptized, you're going to the lake of fire. You're aware of that, right?
Yeah, I think they're wrong, but there are also a bunch of people
You think they're wrong.
who think that Jesus is or Jesus didn't die on the cross. There are lots of people who believe that. Doesn't mean it's true.
We're talking about Baptists, and you're
Yes.
a Baptist, and there are there are many sects of Baptists, but there is one that is opposed to you that says that water baptism is required for salvation, and if you do not become water baptized and believe that that is part of it, you will go to the lake of fire, no matter how much you believe in Jesus.
Right. And I think
Yeah.
that they're
So you
wrong.
see the problem here? Well, you think they're wrong. That's your subjective interpretation. You might have missed out on that
I think
aspect of
they're
salvation.
objectively
Narrow
wrong.
is the gate. Okay. According to your subjective interpretation.
According to proper logic of things that I know are objectively true.
They say the same thing about you.
Sure. But I think that they're wrong, just like I
That's
think
the
you're wrong.
problem,
You
man.
think I'm wrong. I think you're wrong. That's why we have discussions.
I've narrowed this down so far that we're talking about two Baptists. You're one and they're one, and they think you're going to hell, and you think they're wrong, and they you both are using the Bible, and you both think you have some objective standard here, and there's another verse that says narrow is the gate, and few are going to be saved, and you're totally certain that you're right, and they're not right.
That's why I'm a Christian, because I believe it's true.
Big problem.
No, it's not. That's a problem in your worldview. It's not a problem in my worldview.
It's a problem in their worldview.
I mean, not that people would disagree. I mean, I don't know why it would be wrong if it's subjective. That's kind of my problem. If I were an atheist, I wouldn't really even argue with anyone. I wouldn't find any point in it all. But if
you're right, because that's another point for me here, is that this is not a problem for me. None of this is at all. This is a problem for you.
Not really.
Your worldview, not for me.
It's not a problem in my worldview. It's perfectly consistent that Christians are imperfect.
Samuel, it's not a problem for me because I don't believe you're going to hell, and I don't believe I'm going to hell, and I believe this conversation is merely entertainment.
That doesn't mean
it's a problem for you. You think this is life.
It doesn't mean my worldview is wrong, because that's really what we're discussing. I mean, of course, I want you to go to heaven.
That's something completely
but
different.
That's your choice.
Your worldview being wrong or right is completely separate from the fact that this is not a problem for me.
But
this is a problem for you.
It's not a problem.
You're the one looking for the narrow gate, not me. You're the one saying that this is life and death. This is a lake of fire or heaven. It's not me. I'm not saying that. I'm saying this conversation we're having tonight is entertainment for me. This is an exercise in rhetoric. It is not life and death. It matters nothing to me. I can hit this button, turn it off, and it doesn't affect anything about my life. It's a problem for you. It affects your life. You're the one that's putting so much weight on this stuff.
I mean, I think you misunderstand me partly, but like, even if you were to run away in rage, which I hope you wouldn't, but
I'm not.
No, I know. But what I'm saying is, like, and we really have to wrap this up.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is that in the end, there is no problem with you rejecting, because, and I realize you might rebuttal this, okay? But because that is the choice that you have made, you have chosen to not follow God, and so therefore in eternity, because God is eternal, there are eternal consequences. You could choose your actions, but not your consequences. Then God will say, okay, you can be away from me for eternity. That is what hell is. It's just a place where God is not. So it's only evil. It's a lack of
There's
goodness.
more to it than that. You must admit there's more to it. It's not just a place where God is not. It's a place of eternal torment and torture. It is a lake
I
of
think
fire. At least be honest
I
about
think
it.
the torment is exaggerated, and I think also the Bible is quite metaphorical about a lot of it. I think
Is there a lake of fire?
um I mean, I guess I would say I assume that that is literal, but it could be metaphorical. So I think in some sense it's certainly metaphorical, just because that's how the even it's written in Greek, for goodness sakes. Like that's literally how they would speak. That's how they would talk. They speak with metaphors and with idioms, and even we do that all the time today. Just
It sounds like the Bible is just this big riddle that I've got to put all this time into figuring out what's
just
true and
like life,
false. But
right?
the difference is the con. No, I don't want to
You're
get angry
yeah,
and yell at you, but the difference is the consequences that you're claiming.
but you could also get life wrong and die or hurt someone else, right?
I have to put all this time and effort into something that should have been clear from the very beginning. If a God has a message for me that is life and death, I should not have to jump through a bunch of hoops and try really hard to figure out
But that's your
riddles.
opinion.
He should make it clear.
That's your subjective opinion.
What's your subjective opinion
Well,
about it? You think I should have to jump through hoops and riddles?
I think that you should certainly think it through and consider it, but I think personally
That's what I've done for years. That's why I'm an atheist. I've thought it
yeah.
through and considered it.
And
It
God's
makes no
still trying to get a
sense.
hold of you because I'm talking to you today. You may not think that,
Or
but in
maybe
my wide worldview.
rationality and reason is trying to get a hold of you, and that's why I'm here.
So you're saying that that's God?
I'm saying you are your own God. I am my own God. We make our own decisions with our subjective evaluation
Okay.
of what's
Well,
in
if
front
I'm
of us.
God, then you need to be a Christian. um, sorry, I just had to turn that back on you, but um,
That's fine.
I hate to end it here, but I really do. And I can't thank you enough for having this
But
discussion with me.
I
And
don't, and I want to, I don't want to deter you from having future
sure,
conversations here.
sure.
I know that I get really aggressive and I get heated because, this stuff, even though it doesn't matter to me in the same way that it matters to you, um, like I'm passionate about this stuff.
Hmm.
It does matter. And, just because I'm amp up the volume or use a curse word, I don't want to like deter you from a future
Yeah,
conversation. So I would like to keep doing these because I think this is
yeah.
important. So I apologize if I've been offensive in any way or been too aggressive. And I know like I didn't want to be like Ted the atheist because he was pretty aggressive with you for a while there.
Yeah.
I want to keep it friendly. So apologize for anything
Hey,
like
I
that wasn't
I
unfriendly.
appreciate that, and I don't think you're really too much unfriendly. I think even I got a little heated, I would say. I hope I didn't say anything rude. Um,
No,
okay, well, good, because I aim not to. So thank you. And um, any feedback on like if I did anything, like if I said anything that came across as offensive.
no, not at all.
Okay.
You're totally fine.
Well,
I can take
and
it.
and earlier when I stopped you, I didn't want to like I wasn't trying to say that I was offended because I'm really not offended when people swear at me. They really do it all the time. But like I just don't want that on my channel. So
I understand.
and I
I just think that's an interesting,
sure.
that could be its own topic of
Yeah,
conversation because you do have to, demonstrate why that's a problem.
sure. I don't think it's important to like Christianity being true, of course we
Right.
agree on that, right? Swearing could be I could be totally wrong about swearing and Christianity can still be true. So, but that's a whole, it's a separate issue. Um,
Right.
but again, I really appreciate you just talking to me, trying to have a good conversation. I know we lost each other a lot in some of the logic, but I think it's still important. And it shows that like the way we view the world, which is what I mean by worldview, is so different. And it just I think it's great content in that sense, but it also helps us to kind of like learn like where we can meet with each other. Like we clearly agree on some things, but on a lot of things we disagree. So, but of course, that's
Right.
why these conversations are so great, because we're seeking the truth in it all. We're trying to find those connections and so, but thank you everyone for joining. I hope that you'll want to have Mr. Elliot back on. And I hope that this has been both a blessing and also a privilege for you. So God bless you all. And this was the Gospel Call.